there's a lot of different places you can start recapping everything that goes on in Borderlands. It was the first game, comic books, then the second game, then the third game set before the first game, then Tales, then I think Wonderlands, Tales 2, Borderlands 3, the movie which I still haven't seen, and now we're coming up on 4, so there is a lot to unpack here. I think the most logical place to begin, Firestone, fresh off the bus, but even before that there's the intro and the character select screen, and eventually you're off to the races. You get into Firestone, you meet up with the people dotted around the town, or whoever is left. Dr. Zed is kind of the tutorial giver, although the very, very first person you meet, Claptrap, gives you the Echo communication device, sets up your HUD, and then they kind of explain how everything works from there. Vending machines, shield, health, ammo, weapons. You get a little bit of an idea of the different brands, some of which are only in the first Borderlands game. I think SNS munitions. Then you have to defend the town from a couple of waves of bandits. You do some more odd jobs for people around the town. TK Baha, rest in peace. But don't worry, it's not the last of him you'll see, which mainly consists of like a bunch of fetch quests and then go kill so-and-so amount of enemies. At that point, you start getting into the first couple of little boss fights. Nine Toes, who, even though I think other characters have intro cards before him, his is the most intro-y intro card. And then that kind of sets the pace for like every other named character intro card for the rest of the series. Eventually you get a little intro to Scooter, who has a couple of jobs for you. You start to repair the catcher ride, you gotta collect a few bits and pieces, put that back together again, and then the whole world kind of opens up from there. It gets a little bit Mad Maxy after you get a car. You do some big jumps to unlock other parts of the map, and then eventually you get a whole new brand spanking massive open area to just drive around in. And there's like other enemies and vehicles, and then there's even like a vehicle boss who's like Mad Max style. Oh, but I am getting ahead of myself here. You have to do the whole section with Sledge and the mine key, which you end up fighting probably the most freakish enemy that's just like never really mentioned again in all of Borderlands history. It's like massive, roided out, biggest psycho you've ever seen. Genuinely should be in the history books, just no. This is when those like little side missions that just fill up some time start appearing, scavenging the weapon parts. You just get them from like piles of junk and you find them around randomly in areas that are marked on the map. I think there's one for each weapon. And then the Circle of Death, meet and greet. You're just fighting waves and waves of enemies. There's also a PvP arena, which I think was very, very underrated at the time, very underutilized. Eventually you beat Sledge and you head on, you fight all the road warriors, and you pull up to New Haven in the junkyard, which, not to get confused with Old Haven, will end up there eventually, and Sanctuary, that's a whole different game away. I still think the area between Firestone and New Haven, 90% of the wacky things in the game happen there. Going after Lucky for a scooter, which turns out to have serious in-universe consequences apparently. You do an awful lot of side questing once you've arrived, but then story-wise you meet up with Helena Pierce. You do a couple of jobs to get her trust. You go out to meet Crazy Earl. Yeah, as it turns out, is kind of fairly important. He has one of the vault key pieces, which we didn't really realize were a thing at this point. You ended up with one from beating Sledge. You show it to Tannis, and then she realizes we might have a chance of putting them all together and opening the vault to get that fat loot inside. Eventually you get the last piece and save Claptrap from Crom's Canyon, which no, you just save a Claptrap. The Claptrap that we all know wasn't really a distinct Claptrap from any of the other Claptraps at this point. You save a Claptrap and they'll give you some loot, usually from like a hidden chest nearby and a backpack upgrade, so you can just store more loot. You get through Crom's Canyon, and I don't remember these missions being like a requirement at all, but you do a bunch of stuff in Janestown. You kill the mayor because the mayor's brother wants him dead, but then the brother just turns out to be a bandit leader and you have to go after him too. You don't get a piece of the vault key from Crom's Canyon. Why the hell do you even go there again? Because the last piece, you beat the Rack Hive. You just go there for Crazy Earl because he wants you to kill the guy. Anyway, eventually you get the third piece and we get sent off to deal with Baron Flint, who apparently has the last piece. So he's one of the coolest setups. He's on top of like a giant earth moving machine, but eventually it turns out we went there for no reason at all, because Guardian Angel, the person who has just been guiding us along the entire time, ends up betraying us. No, my bad. Tannis betrays us. She ends up siding with Commandant Steel, who is a very random siren, one of like 6 mythical beings that can only exist in the universe at a specific time. We go on to meet like 3 or 4 more, and they reincarnate too, so I think we never really figure out what her like thing is specifically, but her powers are still out there. But she betrays Tannis. Then we save Tannis, and then we're cool again. We go after her, take out a lot of the Crimson Lance along the way, fight our way up the alien-infested mountain. The aliens are the ones who made the vault. There's been aliens in random places all along. I forgot to mention that. I forgot to mention a lot of things so far. This is kind of making me want to replay the games again, because I've forgotten so much. But you get to the final showdown. Steel is the one who ends up opening the vault, and then she is immediately and horrifically gruesomely killed straight away. So then we have to defeat the absolute horrifying monstrosity that has now emerged from the vault, which, like, the thing is too big to fit the whole way out. I think we end up just like fighting the equivalent of its little pinky toe. And then the game wraps up on the note that there is other vaults out there, but they can't be opened unless you have another key, or unless the key that we have ends up like fully charging, which takes like 200 years. But you know, spoilers, jumping right into Borderlands 2 now happens an awful lot faster than that. Although I'm not exactly sure how it's paced. There is the DLCs as well, the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned, who I'm pretty sure I said Dr. Ned earlier, but it's Dr. Zed. Dr. Zed is in no way Dr. Ned. Dr. Ned and or Dr. Zed has a pretty sick mustache, so you can tell them apart. The whole DLC is kind of like horror, Halloween-y, nightmare-y themed, fighting a lot of zombies through Jacob's Cove. It just introduces a whole lot of new enemies. The second DLC was the Underdome, that is like a huge arena, multiple different challenges, multiple different waves. You could fight almost any enemy from the game again, plus bosses. I remember there being little different modifiers that you could use, and I always thought it was a shame that you couldn't use another character in the arena just to like test the abilities. You would have had to like level up a whole fresh one. Moxie was introduced in the main game, but then that's also her origin story, but then she has like several other origin stories on top of that. She just keeps getting more and more backstory. The secret armory of General Knox actually does advance the story after the game, and it's also super vehicle based, because there's just huge stretches of highway where you're driving down, interspersed with like little bandit settlements. Eventually you have to break into a prison, and that's where they kind of explain that all of Pandora is really a prison as well. Everybody got left behind by the Dahl Corporation, especially Tannis, who was like the only normal person at the time and then went insane after. You end up breaking into the armory, and there's like one little glitch where you could like sneak in and not set off the timer that just let you run around and open up every single chest and get the absolute best weapons in the game. The Secret Army of General Knox also had the first raid boss, who was just super incredibly difficult to do, being almost completely invulnerable to most attacks. They add a lot of vehicle variety in this one as well, plus the new weapon rarity, the pearlescent ones, which to this day I think I've only ever still seen like 3 or 4. And then last but not least, Claptrap's Robot Revolution. Claptrap ends up getting some kind of virus, and then Hyperion, his manufacturer, want you to stop them because he starts building more of himself, and then the other Claptraps start claptrapifying other things. Like you end up fighting old enemies from the different games, but Claptrap versions, and you do end up beating the evil version of Claptrap, but then the evil version of Claptrap also has a background story, I think, in the pre-sequel.